Hello, my bookish darlings! Today I have 10 reasons for you to read Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. And I know I'm a little bit late to the game on this one, but it is a young adult urban fantasy that was one of the most anticipated releases of 2020 and has gone to gain a lot of praise and positive reviews. And guess what? I think it is well deserved. Who am I? I am the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. The number 10 reason to read Cemetery Boys is the plot. Now, I'll be honest, I thought the plot was a little bit predictable, but you know what? That's not necessarily a bad thing, because if the author does their job and foreshadows what's going to happen in the future, and you are the type of reader that picks up those little clues, it's kind of satisfying when you see everything click into place. On the other hand, if you like your plots to be completely unpredictable with lots of huge twists and turns that you didn't see coming, maybe you'll be disappointed in Cemetery Boys. But for me, it didn't bother me. I liked figuring out the clues, and I liked being satisfied when I saw everything come together. The number 9 reason is the setting. It takes place in East LA in a Hispanic community in a graveyard. Yes, a lot of the novel takes place in a graveyard complete with ghosts. Yes, the main character, Yadriel, lives in a graveyard with his extended family, and I guess they're like caretakers of the graveyard, so it makes sense. The number 8 reason is the culture, the Latinx brujo culture, and I'm not sure how much is world building or how much the author draws on their own culture, but it's fascinating. In this story, we have the brujo means witches, by the way, bruex. The brujos are only men, and their job is to release lost spirits into the afterlife, but they're not usually in a hurry to do so because the ghosts are allowed to sort of exist in like a graveyard or wherever they died until they're ready to pass over, unless they go maligno, in which case they are danger spirits that have to be forced into the afterlife. Now, what may not come as much of a surprise is the main character, Yadriel, wants to be a brujo. And Yadriel is a trans boy, and he has a lot of resistance from his family and from the other bruex to be a bruja, become a female witch whose powers, by the way, are healing powers. And both the bruja and bruex have something called a protege, which is sort of a magic focal point where they channel their powers. The women, the bruja, have rosaries, and the men have knives or ritual daggers, and both use blood. And by the way, the love interest or other main character, Julian, is a ghost. So you can imagine what type of complications there are to that relationship. Now, this bruja culture is under the auspices of Lady Death, who is some sort of demigod. She looks like a skeleton, and she has blessed this bloodline. Not everyone can be these sort of powerful witch practitioners. They have to be in this bloodline. And if you are in this bloodline on Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead, which is Halloween, November 1st, those in that bloodline can pass over from the land of the dead and visit the living. But spoiler, Julian is not in that bloodline, so he does not get to come back on the Dia de Muertos if he does pass over. And the number 7 reason, I think, is the gay trans representation as told from the own voice's view of the author. It's always an enlightening experience, at least for me, to read a trans character as told from a trans person. I'm thinking of Case and Calendar, and Aiden Thomas certainly falls in this camp. And there's something authentic about reading about this trans boy's relationship with a gay boy, even though he's a ghost. But knowing who the author is certainly gives the story a lot more authenticity, at least for me. Number 6 reason is the relationship between Yadriel and Lita. Lita is Yadriel's grandmother, and she's a powerful Bruja who dead names Yadriel, meaning calling a transgender person by their old name, which you should never do. But it's an interesting dynamic because they're obviously from 2 generations, and it's tough. It's tough seeing how Yadriel has to deal with his grandmother, who he respects and loves, yet has a lot of negative feelings since she can't seem to accept him as a boy. Seems a little too real. The number 5 reason is relationship between Yadriel and his father. This father-son relationship, again, is reminiscent of the relationship with the grandmother, but the father is trying to accept Yadriel as his son. But a lot of the obstacles for the father occurs because he is so afraid for the son. Like, he doesn't believe that Yadriel would be able to become a Brujo because he was born female, and to protect his son, he doesn't allow him to be part of this ritual. But this is a tough one to watch because the father is just almost there. The father is just almost at that point for fully accepting, but he just can't break through that final barrier. So this really makes you root for this relationship to work because it's almost there. You just want to push the father, just push him, just go a little bit further. The number 4 reason is the relationship between Julian and his brother. Now, I've been talking a lot about Yadriel, who is the main point of view character. Julian is the ghost, and the ghost has a brother who's alive. And there is this really interesting love-hate relationship between Julian and his brother. Apparently, I believe their parents have died, so Julian's brother has been raising him sort of as a surrogate parent. But the dynamics of this relationship is very interesting to watch. The number 3 reason are the outcasts. Julian belonged, when he was alive, to a friend group that consists of Luca, Omar, Flocka, and Rocky. And Flocka is a trans girl who Yadriel recognizes. And I think he recognizes some of the other characters, but Flocka is pretty important. Luca is another important character. He's sort of a smaller boy who is susceptible to being recruited to gangs. But since this group often played hooky from school and didn't really go to school, Yadriel has this very negative view towards them, that they're probably some sort of drug dealers, they're a gang, they're bad news, and they aren't what they seem. The number 2 reason is the relationship between Yadriel and Maritza. Maritza is Yadriel's best friend. She is a vegan, which makes being a Bruja hard because they have to use blood to make their magic work. And by blood, I mean little vials of ritual blood from chickens or goats or whatever. But of course, Maritza, being a vegan, does not participate in the magic, even though she has the power to do so. And she has a pair of pit bulls named, was it Raphael and Michelangelo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the dogs are great. She's great. She's tough as nails. She is loyal to a fault almost to Yadriel. I believe they're cousins. And Maritza is actually the one that made Yadriel his portage, his ritual dagger, and helps him with the ceremony to meet Lady Death. Maritza is just that best friend that you really want for yourself. The number one reason is the relationship between Yadriel and Julian. And if you've been keeping track, I've been talking a lot about relationships because I think that's what this author does best. Creating these dynamic, complicated, three-dimensional relationships among the different characters. And Yadriel and Julian are no exception. Yadriel is, of course, the trans boy who is having so much difficulty fitting in with his family, except for Maritza. And he also has to deal with being in the midst of this sort of supernatural calamity that's occurring around them that links all the little plot points together, one of whom is Julian. Julian, like I said, is a ghost, and he's kind of introduced as a bad boy. He was known when he was alive to skip school a lot. Yadriel thinks he may be in a gang or involved with drugs, that type of thing. And I wouldn't really say it's hate to love because it doesn't do justice to the relationship. But it's not like a traditional YA romance of love at first sight and I can't exist without you, that type of melodramatic love story, which I'm not a big fan of. Rather, it puts me more in mind of Aristotle and Dante, where it's a friendship that organically grows and develops, and we can see how these two characters come together. So those are my 10 reasons I think you should read Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, and yes, the book gets my blessing. If you've read Cemetery Boys, let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on it, or let me know if you plan to read it. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.